So we'll start. Namaste and greetings. I Shweta, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi. Extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. Today we are gathered here for week 8 of our 2-month immersive training course on understanding the nuances of climate change in the Indian subcontinent, Cohort 2. I welcome you all to this transformative journey exploring sustainable, resilient, and innovative responses to our current climate challenges. The chair for the program is Ms. Bhargavi Rao ji, an independent researcher and educator, an environment activist based in Bengaluru, and a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI. The experts today are Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida and Professor Rekha Nianthi. The conveners for this course are Mr. Tikender Singh Panwarji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. Proceeding further, we thank everyone for joining us today and appreciate your dedication in investing your time, energy, and commitment to gaining a profound understanding of climate change dynamics and development responses. We have also shared course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to state the housekeeping announcements. First, please join the meeting on time. Second, there will be Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. I would like to invite the chair, Ms. Bhargavi Rao ji, for her opening remarks. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Shweta, for the wonderful introduction, and thanks again to everybody at IMPRI for giving me this opportunity. Today is the penultimate day of this 2-month course, and it has been a pleasure chairing the sessions and learning from the variety of speakers over the last almost 2 months now. So as we come to the final, weeks, next week we'll be closing. It is very interesting that today we will be touching upon climate change in Goa and also the economic potential and strategies of, how climate change can be addressed in South Asia. Two very important topics. And we have great speakers. So as we all know, we've been reading and hearing and watching a lot of news about what's happening in Goa. Climate change is had serious impacts in Goa, which is a small coastal state in India. And most of us relate with its beaches and the biodiversity and tourism out there. The effects of climate change in Goa are multifaceted and significant economic, environmental and social consequences have taken place. And the key aspects of how and things can be addressed largely lie on the impacts of the rising sea levels, the extreme weather events that are happening, then the tourism industry, the challenges that it brings along with it, particularly on the biodiversity and the fragile ecosystems of Goa and all the infrastructure development that is happening around there. And of course, the agricultural challenges that the farming communities are facing due to climate change and public health concerns. And more importantly, the water resource management and what the Union Territory has done in the context of adaptation and mitigation efforts in all these will be very interesting to learn from our speaker today. Then moving on to the South Asia, the economic potential of climate adaptation strategies in South Asia. I think South Asia holds a very significant economic potential, offering opportunities for growth, provided there is a just and fair use of the natural resources. Then understanding how resilience can be built in the communities, particularly if it is coming ground up and not with a top down approach, and a kind of local, I don't like the word development, but if local communities can be allowed to design what they want to, what development means for them, then I think, the 1.8 billion people who live in South Asia will truly be prepared to face these climate challenges. But yes, there are a lot of challenges one has to face at the governance level, with so many agencies all operating together. While each one is trying to address these issues, sometimes there are overlaps, sometimes there is overlooking of certain nuances that we've been learning over the last few weeks. So effective adaptation strategies are key for mitigation, and we will be learning a lot more from our speakers today. So without wasting any more time, over to our speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the introduction. For our first session today, I would like to invite Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, a lawyer and human rights activist based in Goa and a senior visiting fellow at IMPRI. She will be addressing on the topic Community Perspectives on Climate Change in Goa. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
I thought I'm going to present because...
yes, ma'am, of course. Shweta, can we have Rekha ma'am's introduction?
Yeah. All right. Okay, sure. Sorry for the confusion. Yes, so we have Professor Rekha Nianthi, who is a professor at the Department of Geography, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka, and a visiting professor at IMPRI. Professor will guide us through the topic, Economic Potential of Climate Adaptation Strategies in South Asia. Over to you, ma'am. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Shweta and Rao. And also thank you very much for inviting me for my presentation. Dr. Arjun, Dr. Simi, and Dr. Priyanka also. I will share my presentation, PowerPoint presentation, to speak about my particular topic today. Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay. So the given topic is to me.
Could you put it in the slideshow mode?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. Visible?
Yes.
Okay. So the topic given to me is economic potential of climate adaptation strategies in South Asia. Actually, I have done the presentation for the last year also, this online international monsoon school program. I will go to my presentation. I think actually, as Rao said, now we are going to the end of this summer, this monsoon school program. But I'm also just starting from some of the basic points of climate change. Maybe audience participants, they know very well about what is climate change and the definitions and what are the main causes of human causes and natural causes. But again, according to the United Nations, their definition is climate change refers to the long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. Not only temperature, we can take other weather variables also due to burning of fossil fuels. And also NASA is giving the definition for the climate change in change in the average conditions of weather, temperature and rainfall and etc. So we know basically what are the human causes and natural causes. Actually, now this century, we are talking about basically main factors as human causes. Whether we know or not, whether we like or not, natural causes are already happening in the world. in the planet. So from this list, we are a bit familiar with the volcanic eruptions because it's take place in Indonesia, Philippines, Hawaii, like countries. So that is one of the natural causes. But basically, we focus human causes. As we know already, we know the main culprits is burning of fossil fuels and emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and deforestation and industrial process, agricultural activities, especially transportation, likewise. So coming to the Indian subcontinent, I use the presentation because I am having a lot of graphics and maps. So here you can see our Indian subcontinents countries, part of the some countries, and my country is here, Sri Lanka, a small country, and the location of this situation of location, it says a lot of things to us, even though our topic is climate change due to human causes, but we also have some natural components of the climate, the locations and latitudes, kind of other things. So climate over the Indian subcontinent is influenced by, therefore, complex interactions like atmospheric, ocean, and land interaction. So therefore, it is very important to understand how and why the climate is changing across this region, and what are the economic impacts, and how these changes we are expected to grow in future. So I think this is our main focus. So this graphic shows, I think everyone is very familiar with these IPCC graphs. World has been getting warmer and warmer. You can see after 1900, so it is continuously increasing trends of global temperature. So it is due to carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases increases after 1950, steadily increasing continuously to the current level. So this is, we know the main gas is carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, even like methanes. So it will increase by 1.1 Celsius degree warmer than the 19th century. So this is continuously happening in the world. So coming to the last year figures, 2023, I think one of the scholars I remember was talking about this July 3rd to 6th, daily global mean surface air temperature increased by in this period, this month, and now it is moving to 2024. So all those things are because of human emissions of greenhouse gases, plus sometimes natural causes like El Nino events in the tropical Pacific Ocean. Global average temperature is increasing. So therefore, now the global average temperature increased up to 17.23 Celsius on July. It's already recorded, but now coming to 2024, NASA global daily temperature records the daily global average temperature values from this NASA. We can see 2023 are shown in pink color, and the values from the 2024 through June are shown in red color. So we can see daily global temperature values from July 1st to July 23rd, 2024, highest recorded. So I think end of this year, we can say that 2024 is the highest temperature recorded year. So coming to the Indian area, Indian region. So we know Indian subcontinents influenced by various climatic factors. So Indian monsoon, we are very familiar, you and me, even seasonal changes of intertropical convergence zone. I think you are very familiar with this ITCZ moving, and also large scale winds pattern changing and trade winds. So this is Sri Lanka. Mainly we have three climatic zones, wet zone, intermediate zone, and dry zone. And here you can see when the southwest monsoon comes from Indian Ocean, intertropical convergence zone is moving to above India and Sri Lanka. When it comes down, northeast monsoon activate, it will come down to intertropical convergence zone below Sri Lanka and India. So these all kind of climatic factors are influencing the current climate. Plus due to greenhouse gases emissions to the atmosphere. So some of the evidences I have taken from the IPCC because it is the very reliable document for us to follow. IPCC, according to chapter 10, Asia climate change, surface air temperature has been increasing all over the Asian countries is very high confidence records, and it is threats, as we know, social and economic sustainability. And threats of heat waves across Asia, already you know, even India is having heat waves, European countries having heat waves, and drought also increasing in arid and semi-arid areas, especially South Asia, Central Asia, and West Asia. And also, you know, monsoon circulation pattern also weakening some months, South Asian countries, delay or weakening of the monsoon circulation. Sometimes Southwest monsoon come late or the Northeast monsoon come late, kind of a pattern we can notice. And glaciers are melting in Hindu Kush Himalaya region. You must be knowing very well about this. And extreme weather events like, you know, cyclone storms, kind of other weather related drought, floods, caused trillions of dollars of economic damage recent decades. But actually, when we go through the literature records, due to the, early warning system, improved early warning system, now the death toll has actually fallen reasonably, but still, according to the magnitude of the disasters, the death records are also increasing. So the Asian countries, therefore, are experiencing hotter summer, increasing energy demand for cooling. These are actually common things that we know already, and more energy demands in summer seasons and large energy consumption in Asian countries, and position of North Asia mountains moving upwards after 1990. I remember one of the scholars also telling this, and while in Himalayan tree line demonstrate multi-directional shift upwards and downwards, and also kind of freshwater species and is changing due to climate change across Asia. It's also high confidence and climate change, human activity, lightning and human activity make increase in wildfire and burn in North Asian regions after 1990. So this is very common picture. Asian cities are more vulnerable to natural disasters. This is a, you can see, flood event. 1/3 of Asian cities and nearly 1,000 million urban dwellers live in areas with high risk of flooding. You know, Bangladesh, Dhaka, and Delhi, and even Sri Lanka, and other countries, Pakistan, Nepal. So every country's city areas having this issue, and highly vulnerable to flood-related economic losses. Therefore, another factors also, another impacts also, length of plant growth season has increased, North Asia, especially East and North Asia, and sometimes habitat losses and animals, plants, due to climate change in some part of Asia, very high confidence, and species interaction and spatial distribution of invasive species also increase in Asian countries. It is very high confidence, and change in ecosystems in Asian countries, and also intensify the urban heat islands effects across Asian countries. I mean, every cities having this issue now, urban heat islands, even in Sri Lanka, Colombo and Sri Jatanapura areas. And also in scenarios, we can say rise in temperature, upward shift to the mountainous tree lines in many Asian countries, and rise in temperature, and also ocean acidification and sea level rise also take place, especially it is influencing to the livelihoods of coastal communities in Asian countries. And as I said earlier, glaciers in Asian Hindu Kush Himalaya is 75% of the volume lost by century end due to global warming. So causing is a flood and water shortage. Maybe upstream it's maybe water shortage, but downstream get always floods. So then warming ocean always cause the coral bleaching in Asian countries and degradation of coral reef. And so 4.5 million people, Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, subjected to degradation of corals, and climate change risk agriculture and food system in Asia will also progressively differentiated impact across the region in Asian countries, and decline in fisheries and aquaculture crop production, especially in South and Southeast Asian countries. I'm not going to tell about the country names, and as a common, I am taking the figure out in areas, and crop and change in the crops and farming system. Crop areas, almost all regions with negative implication to food security. So in 2023, record-breaking heat waves has affected many Asian countries, including India, our countries, Bangladesh, China, Thailand, and Vietnam. So heat waves in Asia picture is here. So due to the time constraint, I'm not going for details. And so both climatic and non-climatic factors created water stress in water supply and demand in all sub-regions of Asian countries, except North Asia. And international transboundary river basins of, Amu Darya River, Indus, Ganges, face severe water scarcity due to climate variability and change. It is also IPCC say it is very high confidence level, and Asian countries could experience increase in drought condition. 5 to 20% of the high confidence are recorded. So likewise, there are several impacts. Extreme climate events also increase, as extreme climate events like flood, storms, cyclones, droughts comes under extreme climate events. Increased impacts on human health and well-being, and also increase heavy rain and temperature, increase the diarrhea, like Rao said, that many health issues are also coming with this climate change, dengue fever and malaria due to tropical and subtropical areas. We are in the tropical areas, actually 0 to 30 degrees, so latitudes. So these countries are getting vulnerable for climate change, and frequent hot days and intense heat waves. Heat-related deaths are now recording, even India, even Pakistan, I think even Bangladesh. In Sri Lanka is very rare still. Maybe in future, 2050, when we also can hear about the heat waves death there. Flood and droughts will adversely impact food availability, and the prices of food increase, undernourishment, and South and Southeast Asian countries, and also migration flow will be increased due to climate variability and climate change, like Bangladesh, China, India, and the Philippines. So more than 4 million people disaster displacement are recorded. Southeast and East Asian countries, we are familiar with the cyclones now coming actually October, November. India and Sri Lanka, we have to be prepared for the storms and cyclones, October and November, second into monsoon, and cyclones, floods, and typhoon. And global displacement in 2019, almost 30% of the total global displacement will be recorded, are already recorded in 2019. It will be increased like anything. So South and Southeast Asian most at risk by climate change. So you can see this graphic, climate risk index ranking. This is every year ranking. Most of the Asian countries are in the ranking priority list. So we can see here, so the color show us the climate risk index. And loss and damage represent key knowledge gap actually. So with especially West and Central and North Asian countries, and sometimes discriminate in loss and damage figures. Sometimes we are not getting correct figures, and South and Southeast are expected to see significant increase in average annual economic losses between 2005 to 2050, according to IPCC report. So it is very high confidence, and 2080, nearly 1,000 million to 1.1 billion urban dwellers in South and Southeast Asia could be affected by extreme heat and last in more than 30 days per year is a very high confidence. and poor population affect the most in Asian countries. And South Asia surface water and groundwater resources are already under stress due to population growth and economic development activities, and also poor governance and management activities. So this is some of the fact sheet in Sri Lanka got from climate change information fact sheet, Sunday Times. Global scientists predicting the warmest year as 2024. So Sri Lanka's main cultivation season is expected to be adversely impacted due to the onset of drought due to the El Nino effects. And the country's economy, once again, it will be affected by 2024 according to some predictions. And WMO forecast that there is a 90% probability of El Nino events continuing during the second half of 2023. That means next cultivation season. And drought in Sri Lanka, the drought is increasing. In last 30 years, drought have affected more than 6 million people in Sri Lanka, and El Nino result, warmer and drier conditions, and also a number of consecutive dry days increase, while number of consecutive wet days reduce in Sri Lanka, and special pattern of rainfall also indicate the expansion of the dry zone in Sri Lanka. As I show you the picture, we have mainly three climatic zones, and that the dry zone is expansion. Some scholars, they found that the results through the analysis, and some of the district will be affected. And Sri Lanka, these are the actually policy planning documents. We have National Climate Change Policy of Sri Lanka, different years. And this is the last one, is the latest one, this addressing climate change impacts on its country. Sri Lanka has launched National Adaptation Plan for climate change impacts from 2016 to 2025. So policy documents are here. So then coming to economic impacts of climate change, economic impacts of climate change is very global, geographically, and difficult to very forecast country-wise or specific area-wise. Current economic forecast may seriously underestimate the effects of climate change and need for new models sometimes. Day by day, the scientists, they use different scenarios, different forecasts, different models for predictions. To get more predictions, more new models will give more accurate picture of potential loss and damage. So this picture is actually global economic damage caused by each country's greenhouse gas emissions. You can see the country wise, the graphic, the contribution of trillion of US dollars, how the countries are cooperating for global economic damage caused by greenhouse gas emissions, the USA, China, Russia, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Japan. Likewise, the contribution you can see, the distribution of warming impacts from emitters has been unequal, and with high income, high emitting countries benefiting while harming low income, low emitting countries. This is the normal picture, normal pattern of the world. So and also, you, as Rao said, that agriculture sector is very vulnerable to climate change, and so you can see the contribution of 63. One of the research outcomes: 63% of agriculture are harmed to the agricultural sector, and in comparing with other sectors, it is 26%. So this is very nice graphic, I think, to understand in India, commodity-wise, what are the impact, negative, mix, and positive impacts. Climate change impact on agriculture leads to 1.5% loss in India's GDP by 2030. Now we are in 2024. These predictions, we can see whether it's correct or not, and especially for rice and wheat cultivation, likely to see about 6 to 10% decrease. You can see the red color, all right. Rice, wheat, maize, sorghums are very, very negative impacts are coming. And potato and groundnuts and coconuts are mixed results are here. So you can see the positive, what are the positive crops that India is in impacts climate due to climate change. So this is also very, very nice picture, nice presentation actually from IPCC report. we can see the Southeast Asian countries differently, and South Asia countries, and East Asian countries, and Central Asian countries differently. If you go to the South Asia, you can see India in here, Rajasthan, India, Hyderabad, North India, South India, and Bangladesh, and Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. So what are the crops that are very vulnerable? So you can see the rice and wheat and coals and cereals are decreasing 2.3 and 8.6 when 2030 comes, the 2050 comes. So likewise, so we can see what will happen to the crops production, wheat, rice, and rice, tea. Even Sri Lanka tea cultivation will be affected by 8 to 17 percentage will decrease. Even rice cultivation will be decreased in Sri Lanka when 2030-50 comes. So those who are going to do some kind of PhDs and higher studies also, they can compare about these figures and where the most vulnerable areas are recorded in Sri Lanka or India or Bangladesh, or even country-wise also can be compared, and region-wise and the area-wise, how the spatial pattern, distributing pattern, what are the reasons for all those things are very, very interesting to do some research in future also. And South Asia is 10 times more exposed than Europe. GDP risk at 2025, you can see the South Asia, here this bar graph, it's very high risk. We are in very high risk in GDP. And here climate damage of global economy due to climate change as function of temperature change. So there is a very good correlation with the global temperature change and increases, and also climate damage and as percentage of global economy. So a new study of 135 countries estimates that 4% of global annual economic outputs could be lost by 2050 because of climate change. And low and income and lower middle income, like our countries, low middle income or low income countries are more likely to face GDP losses, with South Asian most at risk. So in this graphic says us, it's really most at risk. So coastal cities, in other way, South and Southeast Asia's coastal areas are also expected to increase in average annual economic losses between 2005 to 2050 due to flooding, coastal storm surge, with very high losses in East Asian cities under the high emission scenario. So I'm not going to explain every graphic. So here also side effects of air conditioning. And because when global warming takes place, the consumption of electrical consumption also increasing. So and weather damage grew more costly in past decades. Here you can see global economic losses associated with weather-related disasters, weather-related, or we can say hydrometeorological disasters. So in US dollars, you can see time to time how it is changing. So not only that, climate change has caused direct losses due to the damage in infrastructure. So as you know, flood and storms, cyclones, and kind of weather-related disasters make a lot of infrastructure damages. So therefore, urban adaptation across Asia, infrastructural adaptation are very, very important for flood protection. As flood protection measures, we can introduce, like almost, I mean, some countries already introduced, but still not enough, climate resilient highways and sustainable land use planning and nature-based economic ecosystem-based solution like mangroves development, restoration, managing urban green spaces, and urban farming. I heard Tamil Nadu is very good for urban agriculture, urban farming, technological solutions, smart cities, early warning systems, behavioral adaptation also, that means improve our awarenesses. Actually, this is also one type of awareness. Today's also we are having the awareness program. This and preparedness measurements are very, very important when we talk about the disaster risk reduction. And severe weather and climate-related extreme events are expected to intensify further the economic losses in future. We know when the intensity of disasters are increasing, so the economic losses in future also increasing. So I mean, due to this, not only man-made disasters, and as El Nino is a weather phenomena that develop from abnormal warm water temperature, it is also increase in the current situation in Pacific Ocean. And so then Asian countries include unusual precipitation patterns and more extreme droughts or floods. There is a very high risk that an acute El Nino will cause severe economic disruption to many Asian countries. So it is also additional cause El Nino event. So then coming to the what are the options that we can say, actually adaptation also take place now in different areas of the Asian countries, but still we know now technology is developing very fast, and so many countries are not using, or due to various reasons. Climate smart agriculture now already started some areas, integrated approach to managing landscape, croplands, livestock and forest and fisheries to enhance the good security. Drone technology is used in many countries. In India is best, I think. So some areas already doing these practices. But Europe countries and Japan and those countries are extremely, they are using these practices. And Internet of Things, IoT, is now very, very famous and improving lots in agricultural community, but still we are not coming to the target levels. So using of drone for field monitoring and water management systems and kind of soil moisture in sensors, all those things, if we can use in agricultural practices, I think we can adapt to the existing climatic change. Otherwise, we are getting very vulnerable in future. So another one option is ecosystem-based DRR, disaster risk reduction, nature-based solution. For resilience, we can use ecosystem act as a buffer against natural disasters or hydrometeorological disasters, preventing disaster and reducing disaster impact to the society, community, and the people, and also the critical infrastructure. So if we can follow this climate change, ecosystem, and people, three pillars of this ecosystem-based mitigation practices, and also adaptation practices for kind of different ecosystem-based adaptation, we can have very good positive impacts and also negative impacts, but we can minimize as much as possible, or we can adapt to the existing level of the climate change. So not going for many things. And evidence of effectiveness of urban ecosystem-based adaptation in Asia. This is also one of the very interesting information that I found from my PCC report, how ecosystem-based adaptation options can be promoted. So risk and, that we know already what are the risks of extreme heat and urban heat islands creating, and flooding and sea level rise and food insecurity. And if we use the ecosystem-based option, like for urban heat islands, if we can use urban parks, green spaces, we can reduce the risk reduction with this. This circle is very high confidence. Here is a blue color is here the same color, and it is, we can have very high confidence to the risk reduction. Ecosystem benefits also medium benefits, and economic benefits also there, even though small, and human well-being is very, very much. So you can see the high confidence here, effectiveness is very high in this circle. So likewise, you can compare all those things. This conceptual framework is very, very important as using as a, research scholars for research actually. We also can use this diagram to understand how we can introduce the different adaptation strategies and the confidence and effectiveness and confidence level. If we can do researchers, it's very, very interesting. I think ecological storm water management and even ecosystem based option is mangroves restoration. And you know mangroves restoration is very, very positive impacts giving, because I remember 2004 tsunami also, wherever the mangrove structures are strong, I think we could not see much damages, even many Asian countries when it took place. So urban agriculture is another one. I think now everyone is talking about this, and many countries, many urban dwellers, they are very much keen of urban agriculture. But still we are not, even though in the policy documents, that still we do not have much kind of uh, attraction to giving these things by the countries or government, or I don't know, that NGOs or whoever. There are so many NGOs and governance bodies, so they can encourage these things at least. Maybe some areas already happening, having. Uh, and even invest in urban blue-green infrastructure is another option. Actually, this network provides the solution for urban and climate challenge by combination of infrastructure into ecological restoration and urban designs together, all together, even with water bodies such as rivers and tanks. Considering all those things, when infrastructure development take place or city development planning designs, if we are considering all these things, actually green roof and kind of wetland conservation and kind of rainwater harvesting in the city areas, at least we can have some kind of positive positive kind of things for the environment, as well as the society, as also economic loss we can decrease. And if we consider the opportunities for climate resilience development, CRD, and Sendai framework for action in DRR, we can achieve the sustainable development goals. I think every country is now going through these sustainable development goals, 17 goals to transform our world. So then if we also can consider the climate change adaptation and mitigation and Sendai framework for action, and because Sendai framework for action also considering the disaster risk reduction, basically hydrometeorological disasters are there. So we can achieve all the sustainable development goals. And these three books I found from the internet, Springer's publication, those who are doing higher studies, I mean, that adaptation, already we have status of climate change adaptation Asia and the Pacific region, climate change adaptation in Southeast Asia, and adaptation to climate change in Asia. I think the content having lot of information of this book, if you can buy, if you can purchase. So I don't know whether it is free available. I'm not thinking that. And cost of climate change also, we can have avoided damage and decide. Yes, with the avoiding damage, we can have cost of climate change without adaptation. It is increase in trend. But if we have some kind of cost of adaptation with residual climate change strategies, we can actually minimize the impact. So coming to the mitigation, I am not talking mitigation option today. So I'm basically going with the discussion with the adaptation. But mitigation, already we have some mitigation, but sometimes we can find some mitigation under adaptation, and also some mitigations coming under mitigation also, like reforestation and kind of things are both mitigation. But basically mitigation minimize the greenhouse gas emission in key sectors of economy, promoting the use of renewable energy and low carbon fuels and energy efficiency improvement. These are the coming under mitigation, because if we can minimize the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that is coming under minimize the greenhouse gases, it is actually mitigations. So through mitigation also we can reduce the loss and damage to the economic sector. So Yeah, this is another picture is very, very interesting if you go through very leisurely time. So this table says a lot of things. You know, everybody's target. Paris Agreement is every country should keep the temperature below 2 Celsius degree. So we, India, Sri Lanka, Asian countries and other countries, we also all bound to keep it this record under 2 scenario. And if we go beyond that, see temperature Celsius beyond 2 say degree and beyond 2.6, beyond 3.2, like that, the impacts are very, very bad and negative. So if we can follow the at least Paris Agreement, the below 2 Celsius degree, at least we can decrease by our economic impacts or negatively impact GDP in all region by mid-century 4 points. So you can see Asian, we can decrease by 4 points. If we are not following that, it will decrease by 17. If we are not following that also, if we it can decrease by 29 our GDP. So therefore, I think we have to think about this impact of climate change. Forecasted records, it's the hardest hit for Asian economies with 5.5 hit GDP in the best case scenario, and 26.5 is the hit severe scenario if we go in for this. So therefore, we have to follow below 2 Celsius degree scenario. So economic losses from extreme weather is rockets in Asia, 14 November. This is some sources taken from sources. So since my time is going very fast, I'm not going to talk all these things. These are also the economic losses. 2020 records China, India, Thailand, how much billions US dollars losses figures are here, so you can see. And due to the different hazards, total economic damage this much. Million people, 48, nearly 50 million people were directly affected, and 2021, 100 natural hazards even in Asia, 80 were floods and storm events. Most of the things come in under floods and storms, and almost 4,000 fatalities. And storm also caused significant economic damage to India, China, and Japan. And climate change danger to South Asia's economy, 19 August 2014 records. This report says that Bangladesh, 6 countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka will lose an average 1.8% of its annual gross domestic products, rising 8.8 by 2100. So likewise, there are several reports pointing out that Asia is vulnerable to economic loss and damage and economic situation. The region has an estimated 4 million people living in extreme poverty below the threshold of 1.90 US dollars per day. So all those things that we can identify is very destructive in terms of both economic and social impacts to our countries. So these are also recent recorded impacts. 2022 Pakistan due to flood affected more than 33 million people and causing $30 billion in economic losses. So likewise, that is Pakistan and India also same, estimated 9 billion in economic losses 2021. And cyclone Bangladesh, Amphan cyclone 2020, it's also a lot of damage. And Nepal, because of glacier outburst burst of the landslides and damage critical infrastructure and hydropower plants, roads. It's also a lot of damage, economic losses. Himalayan Times recorded, and Sri Lanka also 2022 led 20% of drought condition with, And now already I talk about the economic opportunities and our climate adaptation, renewable energy use we have to use, sustainable agriculture, smart agriculture, ecotourism practices we need to promote, and biodiversity conservation also another option, ecotourism potential, another option for climate change adaptation. We have a lot of barriers also implementing these things. Those points are very common to all countries, lack of funding and institutional barriers and knowledge gap, inadequate data and information, research and technical capacity of Asian countries, decision-making problem, coordination and weak coordination, and political issues, and financial resource problem, and so many things are here with us to as barriers and also as challenges to implement in, because we have very good in policy documents, even all Asian countries, very good policies coming every year, every 3 years, every 5 years, targets, so many things are there, but when we go for the implementation process, so we all have this limitation. I think I'm going to stop my presentation. I think the next speaker also waiting for the presentation. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very insightful session, ma'am. I would like to invite the chair for her remarks.
Thank you, Shweta, and thank you, Dr. Rekha. I think that was an excellent, very detailed presentation of the entire issue of climate change and what the IPCC says. And thanks for drawing attention to the SDG goals, because many a time we seem to have put that aside, chasing after our, the promises made under climate change. So thanks for that very comprehensive account of what the challenges are, what needs to be done, and what are the efforts that are ongoing. And many of your slides were very informative, with a lot of numbers and a lot of references which our participants can truly, go back and refer for their own work. Given that we have time constraints, maybe for 5 minutes we could open up the question and answer session before our next speaker. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, namaste. Namaste from Kathmandu. And the paper very comprehensive with a fact and figure. And in fact, she highlighted, and Professor Rekha highlighted much on the, socioeconomic facet of climate change, impact of climate change in South Asia. Also, she referred the East Asian countries and other countries. And, I would like to add a few points on it, not a comment, just add, that is, we, the SAARC countries, we are severely affected by climate change, and we need to have buffer stock, within the SAARC, and under the umbrella of, SAARC, there is the provision of food bank like that, and which has not been materialized yet. That should be materialized, and the best practices we do have within the SAARC nations, that should be disseminated to each other countries, so that, they could have a kind of practice to mitigate the climate change, As I would like to remind the case, in the case of Nepal, we face the Gulf situation in eastern part of Nepal, recently, I think 1 month back, the Himnadi, it was a burst, and the flooding, that swept some 3 or 4 villages on the eastern part, just near the base camp of Sagarmatha, so happening, that might happen in another place too, even in Arunachal Pradesh, Nepal, even Afghanistan, how could we mitigate such a incident collectively? That should be kept in mind. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So yeah, we need to have kind of regional collaborations, taking leadership by the Indian. I think India is the big country, and
True, it's true.
yeah, so other countries with together we can have already we have some collaborations, I think, but these collaborations are very limited and small scale, not like that. I mean, government sector initiate, if all the countries as a sub countries, as this scholar said, if we can introduce climate change adaptation practices by sub-countries, like under that headings, like Sendai Framework for Action is United Nations, UNISDR document, like that. Asian countries also should be able to develop kind of framework together. I think together we can actually take some kind of very good practices, can share technology and financial resources and human power, human resources, and everything. So, yeah, very good idea.
The fiscal strain, that is also one of the problem, I think, ma'am, because the each government of South Asia, I see that they are investing less on socio-economic facet. I mean, education, health, etc. That is a burning issue. That is not happening. If they fail to invest more on health, education, the basic thing, the poor, they will fail, to cope with the climate, not only climate change, in the course of production and employment too. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, the country-wise is also vulnerable to climate change and disaster risk reduction, that we know very well. I mean, country-wise also we have the ability, economic capacity, and other capacities are different. So that's why we need to all together get together and have some kind of policy framework or something like that to share each other. So then only we can achieve, because we cannot wait now. So now Paris Agreement already say that not to go beyond the 2 Celsius degree temperature increases. If we go beyond that, as I show you, there are several implications, several impacts will come to us. So as a region, I think we should be able to give this message to the higher authority, higher body. If we can take that type of initiatives, I don't think that from this type of programs, whether we can do or not, but at least can give the message to the policy level or the higher authority of the government, or because everybody need to get together now. I think we don't have time to wait. Now 2030 is coming very recently. 2024, there are so many predictions, forecasts going on. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, ma'am. We have one last question in the Q&A box, which is, please share in detail on the positive impacts of climate change.
Positive impacts of climate change. Okay, so you can, this graphic also you can see here, this is the increasing, this triangular is increasing. You can see the Rajasthan here, this one is increasing, and Nepal, this one is increasing fisheries, here Rajasthan, and here you can see Northeast Thailand kind of increases 2.6 percentage. We have to follow this diagram and what are the symbol for increases and decreases. So then we can understand. Anybody needs to go for this chapter, you can go to the IPCC last report. It is there, chapter 10, Asia. So you will get, I think, this one.
I think those were the questions. I think it's the end. So yes, we can wrap up the session, ma'am. So thank you very much for an insightful session. Um, we will look forward to having you in the future IMPRI events as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me all. See you soon again somewhere in forums platform.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
nice to meet you. Namaste. Namaste
Thank you.
also.
Namaste.
Yeah.
Bye.
Next time I will be here.
Okay.
Right, moving forward for our next session, I am delighted to invite Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, lawyer and a human rights activist based in Goa and a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI. Advocate Dr. Almeida, will address on the topic community perspectives on climate change in Goa. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. So basically, I will be speaking slightly, perhaps on a discordant note, perhaps, because I'm not talking of what are the global perspectives on climate change or what the whatever panel has been speaking about. This will be on the other hand, at the other end of the stick, that is the communities and the people. So basically, and what I will try to do is I will share a presentation where I've tried to capture some of the voices of people in terms of how they're perceiving climate change and what is causing it at very, very local levels. And from their quotes, I'll use their quotes as a jumping off point to discuss what are the other angles from which we can really look at climate change? What are the angles from which we can look at what is called climate resilient infrastructure? Because these are expressions that are constantly used. Also that, very often we talk of common but differentiated responsibilities, but it's true, there has to be common but differentiated responsibility, but that common but differentiated responsibility cannot become the basis for any state to kind of go completely to kind of completely neglect its obligations towards addressing climate change, or rather to be proactive in contributing to climate change. So these are some of the things that I will be talking about in this session. So let me begin with sharing my presentation. Yes. Yeah. So first of all, I'll contextualize since I'm talking in the context of Goa. But while I'm talking in the context of Goa, I still think that because whenever people talk of climate change, they look at it as a global phenomenon. And yes, it is a global phenomenon, but it's also important to contextualize it in our own geographical setups. I wouldn't say necessarily only in terms of governance and what constitutes a particular territory under a particular government, but in terms of certain geographical contiguity and or certain features, geographical features. So it is for this reason that I'd like to contextualize. So in that sense, I'm trying to contextualize where we stand in Goa. Now, first of all, Goa was not part of the Indian Union until 1961 because it was a late entrant into the Indian state. But for very many reasons, the Indian state has treated it as a pleasure periphery of India. And it is facing the impacts of climate change resultant from both local, other states, national, regional, and international actions and neglect. So it's not about, yes, people have a role to play in contributing to climate change in terms of addressing climate change, But it's not just about people. It's also about how states function. What are the dynamics between governments? What are the dynamics of local governments, local governments with neighboring state governments? What are the dynamics of national governments, regional governments? Like somebody earlier mentioned, regional bodies, let's say, like someone talked about the SARC. I think it's almost dysfunctional at this point of time, as far as I can see. But it's important to revitalize it, and international actions and neglect. So these are all these all add up to what the kind of impacts that Goa is facing today. So what I will try to do is explore how local residents perceive climate change. Now here you must remember that if we go and tell somebody, what do you think is how climate change is happening, or what are the impacts of climate change? First of all, the word climate change is not a word understood at a very, very ground level. So we have to break it down and talk about the broad basic definition of climate change, that there is global warming, there is and then say, what do you think, why do you think this is happening? What could be, do you think here is there a contribution by this state to which is also causing an increase, I mean, having a more pronounced effect in terms of aggravating climate change? These are the questions that we have to ask and gently elicit responses. So what I'm talking about now when I talk about perspectives of local residents would be based on some based on interviews that I've done, and some based on also on newspaper reports of where let's say activists in the community have been quoted. So in relation to climate change, to bring the whole picture about what community perspectives are. And I would think that this is necessary to be done. While I'm speaking of Goa, I would think this is necessary to be done with reference to each one's very local state or country. Maybe I'm talking of Goa because India is a huge continent, and Goa has certain specific features in terms of its location. It has 104 kilometers. It's a very small state. Now, in a state in India, but it's not a state in terms of a country. So in terms of governance, what happens when plans are being made without taking into account the specificities, that it's a very small state in India, has a 104-kilometer coastline, but also has a hinterland. So how does one address it in this situation? So this is each state has its specificities which need to be specially looked at. Now, yeah. Now I'll just talk of the just trying to get this. Sorry. Yeah. Here's a voice from a person who has been farming ever since he knows, I mean, as a child and on to now. So he says that in our childhood we sowed paddy seeds in May, transplanted in June, and then harvested in September. He says now the rains come at any time. This year we sowed the seeds, most of the seedlings rotted with the heavy rain. Then whatever we managed to salvage, we transplanted, and then again there was heavy rain. And with the flooding, the crop got spoiled. This problem we are facing over the last couple of years. So he's talking about how the erratic rains, which is part of the whole climate change scenario, how this is really affecting people in terms of in terms of the crop and the crop losses that they're suffering because of climate change. And this farmer, when I interviewed this farmer, and when I was talking to him, he was also talking about the various kinds of infrastructure that I would say not sophisticated infrastructure, very local, small infrastructure that used to be created also to kind of harvest the rainwater, which is not about building any tanks or anything, but how they would keep the water within a confined space, and then gradually release the water into the in after the rains. So all these practices have not been been discouraged, or not encouraged, and farming itself is not encouraged. And then in the context of what real estate can, if you can sell your field to real estate, you can sort of sit back and maybe make earnings out of the interest out of what you sell it for, perhaps. So people feel that there's no value for farm work. Besides that, there's also like a caste kind of attitude, in the sense that the farmer is looked down upon, and then that caste attitude is perpetuated by the farmer continuing in farming. So there are all these multifaceted, multi-related, all kind of related aspects to all these things. So and therefore these once existent I would call them climate resilient infrastructures. Indigenous climate resilient infrastructures have gone for a toss. They are not being followed, but they would be local ways where people will have control over how they can deal with these with day-to-day situations, rather than depending on somebody somewhere to release water, to trap water, etc. So these are some of the things that I understood when I was interviewing this farmer, as I was talking to him. Then there was this other farmer who said that yeah, because the fields are not viable to cultivate, then they're being filled with mud. Now, when they're being filled with mud, because when you fill it with mud, then it's a little more viable for in terms of cultivation. Maybe you can have trees, you can have you can have vegetables, which like the especially with low-lying fields, you have got to kind of revamp the whole thing when it comes to the next season. So then they say that so it seems like filling it with mud is an easier solution, and it's but the problem is that our drainage systems are also, we have our natural drainage systems, and these drainage systems are also blocked and clogged because of this. So all this is kind of adding up to a situation where we are more and more vulnerable to climate change. And we need to therefore look at what are we doing that is either adding up to climate change or adding up to us being more and more vulnerable to climate change. This is why I'm stressing on this is why the need to stress on these voices, because they're telling us what these are older people. They're telling us what it was at once upon a time and what it is now. Once upon a time, they mean like 40 years ago, and what it is now. So they can see the changes. They say, and they speak about that very, very sharply. And it is these voices that we need to take into account to understand first the seriousness, like the previous speaker was saying, the time to act is now, or rather, I would say the time to act is yesterday. So to understand the seriousness and the need to kind of join forces to address it. We know the recent Wayanad, the whole landslide issue and the disaster. So there have been some interviews that were done by the local press with various local community activists, and one of them said, landslides are occurring because we are making changes to land use pattern. The mountains and slopes which had indigenous tree cover are being felled and used for horticultural purposes. Then the other person, Abhijit Prabhu Desai of Rainbow Warriors, what does he say? Goa is on the tipping point, and if we don't stop destruction of the plateau and hills, we will suffer the same fate, if not worse. He's talking of same fate in relation to Wayanad. We will have nowhere to run. Damage has already been done to a large extent, as we have seen landslides on highways, creating dangerous zones. So you see, there have been these landslides on highways which have resulted in cars being vehicles, for example, being trapped in the within the mud that came down. If you see the pictures, Wayanad and Goa share the same erosion-prone geology of the laterite red mud. There has to be a complete protection of these areas. Now, so here, what they're speaking about is the changes in land use pattern. Now, we are in fact fortunate to have been one of the earliest to have had a Town and Country Planning Act, which is supposed to kind of manage the land use pattern. Because it's one thing, some people may own land, but it's about ensuring that land use pattern, that there is a judicious balance in the land use pattern to recognize the existing land uses and to develop from there. But we find that, so that was the reason why regional plans had to be made. And it was a visionary idea at that time, because I think most other states in India, for example, have had this planning coming later. It was visionary because you're taking into account the entire topography of the place, the uses, the land uses. But sadly, when we're talking of land uses, we talk in a very male way about land uses, and I'll come to that at some point of time. So, but even then, even if you go by those land uses, when you talk of, like, say, agriculture, horticulture, then so the land uses for, like, or the shore for fishing. So now all these land uses, suddenly the government has made it possible to convert the land use, and that's available for a price, and not only the price over the table, but also, as you all know, in these cases land is at a premium. In a place like Goa, which is very small, it is even more at a premium, because it's more so because it's perceived as the pleasure periphery of the rest of the world, and particularly of the rest of India. And then in this context, what happens is that the tendency is to concretize, and therefore, when they're throwing it open for conversions, there is a high chance that conversions, the individual landowners will opt for those conversions, because they're looking at profits, and they're not looking at what's going to happen to not leave alone other people's next generation, to their own next generations. So these are some of the things that are arising in Goa. And I come to the whole issue of gendered land use patterns. See, as I would say that, for example, when gendered or indigenous centric, to understand it from an indigenous person's perspective. So for example, you will have pastoral communities that will use what seems to the rest of the world as just shrubs. You see, so I remember once we were objecting to the setting up of a golf course in a particular place, and they said, because, and we said you should have an environment impact assessment. They said, why environment impact assessment? There are no trees, there isn't a manufacturing process that will, emit something into the air, or emit like poisonous gases into the air. So why have an environment impact assessment? So here you see that the whole thing is that they are not looking at those shrubs as having value. They don't realize that cattle, for them, that shrubbery, that vegetation is the feed of the cattle, and those are the common grounds, so to say. They may be technically under somebody's ownership, but they are the common grounds on which cattle have been traditionally were being traditionally grazed. So if these land use patterns are not understood, then what we will do is we will have wanton changes to land use patterns, and which will not take into account the uses, and second, the implications. See, if the local people have been using these lands, drawing, say, let's say herbal medicines from the hillside, whatever, they don't do it in an exploitative way. Why do they not do it in an exploitative way? I'm talking of local as in indigenous people living in that particular area, in any particular area. They don't do it in an exploitative way because the consequences are going to be borne by them itself. So if they say, oh, okay, let me just, whack all the stuff that is there on the hills. Let me take that all off and, make packets of it and sell like, herbal produce or like, what should I say, in terms of, some of these, what you call commercial herbal producers. So if you have that kind of an approach, you're denuding the hill slopes. This has in turn has consequences, and this is what people are talking about. And these are the things that people have done. These are the ways in which people have sustained the environment. People have ensured that they do not become vulnerable in some ways to climate change. I know that with all the efforts that even if the states take now, given the global warming, there's more that has to be done. But leave alone that, in terms of at least reduced vulnerabilities, what have people done? How have people's lifestyles been? Is something that we need to take into account. Are we going to go for a consumeristic approach like the pharmaceutical industry does, or are we going to go for an indigenous approach? These are things that we maybe need to ask. These are hard questions that we will have to ask. So we cannot talk of. I'm for one not a science person even, and I will say that even if I'm not a science person, I must have a voice. And if I can have a voice, I mean, every person on the ground who is engaging, more so people who are engaging with nature as a part of their livelihoods, need to have a voice. So their uses really need to be taken into account. Now, okay. Now there are also each place has its own specific ecosystems. So in Goa, there's something called the Khazan ecosystem. This system includes the outer and inner bunds, sluice gates, and drainage canals, all designed to manage water flow and salinity levels effectively. It is a brilliant example of how traditional knowledge and community effort can create a balanced and productive ecosystem, which has played an intrinsic role in alleviating the effects of soil salinization, conserving biodiversity, and ensuring food security for over 3,500 years. Okay, so this Kazan ecosystem is now under threat. People are raising their voices because these are the systems, because you have these, outer, as I just told you, our own climate resilient, indigenous climate resilient infrastructure. These are the ones that have helped us, these have helped to manage the drainage and helped prevent the places from flooding. Now, if those Kazan ecosystems are being destroyed because people want to concretize the place, then that's a recipe for disaster. Also, there is a tendency to say that there's a tendency to look for technocratic solutions to climate change, and this is also something we need to be we need to guard against, because very often these technocratic solutions come under the disguise of they come under the disguise of solutions, but they're actually money-making rackets where that particular technology, there'll be massive contracts given to various parties that be, and they will get their commissions for it. And it, to my mind, and I used to say this before, and I will not hesitate to say it now also, that this renewable energy, whole thing, talk about renewable energy is nothing but a step in that direction. I'm not saying we should not use renewable energy, but I'm saying the manner in which it is being done, how it is being handled, it seems these are, we need to therefore look at governance. We cannot look at climate change in isolation from governance. We need to address these issues. Otherwise, it's like saying, oh, you're being choked, and it's saying, come on, preserve your climate, preserve your place, preserve your environment in your place, but you're being choked, and first you need to get the choke off you. So you need to get the governance to change, in terms of how we need to see how we can mediate governance so that it changes to understand basic, it changes to be responsive to basic understandings of sustenance of the environment. And for that to happen, there needs to be, because governance will not change, because unless there is a change, because people elect the governments we have. So it means remembering what was being done, how it has been done. And yes, if technology has evolved, I'm not against technology, but how can we use that technology in a way that is sensitive to the environment? I'm not saying we should, like, for example, you have technology today that will take care that scavengers do not have to scavenge or you don't have to clean up sewage tanks. People do not have to go into pits to clean up sewage tanks. That's good as a technology, but the point is, not all technology is bad, but when it's a technology that is inherently problematic in terms of how it is designed, in terms of who it is designed, who can access that technology, then these are areas that we need to really look at. If we are really looking at addressing these issues, they cannot be addressed by like tinkering with, okay, there is this Kazan ecosystem, so let's see how to preserve it. It won't work that way, because you will have the most beautiful plans. I think India has some of the best environment laws. In Goa itself, we have some of the most wonderful looking plans. But if you ask me, what in terms of implementation, somewhere it just doesn't work, and it just doesn't work because there are people who have profit stakes in letting it continue. And if so long as people will not rise, people have the knowledge, so it's not about educating people about it, but it's about helping them remember, because it's buried, even their own knowledges are buried under layers of this blitz of what the governments project as being the causes and what needs to be done. So these are things that we need to take into account. Similarly, with low-lying fields, like the farmer who said, the fields are being filled with mud. So, but these fields play the role of absorbing the water and preventing flooding. So we have to keep this into account, considering the sea level rise. Now, this is a quote from a local architect who is very much what you call in sync with ground levels. And here's what she says: there's a treasure of synergies that we have in Goa between academic knowledges and indigenous knowledges, which need to be tapped to prevent further climate change, mitigate climate change, and to find strategies of resilience to climate change. So really, this is really very, very important. We have indigenous knowledges, but those indigenous knowledges have now to be synergized with academic knowledges, because the academic knowledges are trying also to look at the larger picture, because of course each location or each village or each place does not exist is not an island in itself. And it is connected to the larger land and the larger landscape. There's also the issue of cultural impacts, because again, we often, when we talk of climate change, we talk of floods, etc. But we must know that there's also our own agricultural practices, etc., are connected with cultural. The culture is connected rather with our agricultural practices, our practices of engaging with nature. So, for example, there is a Catholic feast where after the harvest there would be a farmer, that is the infant Jesus statue. I'm not going to the details of that feast as such, but at that farmer is to happen after the harvest. Okay, and there would be a thanksgiving for the harvest, and then for that on the occasion of that thanksgiving, that night there would be this theatre performances. Theatre is something like a local our local plays, if I may use the word for want of a better word. And these used to happen in in different wardos, as this farmer was saying. Now, what is happening is there are no theatres anymore, because they didn't have the money or this thing to keep on bringing money to that ward, meaning to put a tent or something for the interest for the play. But now, because after after the harvest, you still have rains, or you don't even have a proper harvest, and you still have rains. So the thing is, they can't have those yachts anymore, because the it's so erratic. And you cannot afford to put up this tent infrastructure, because that's quite expensive, and to put it up in each ward is not something that can be afforded. So there are what may not be seen, but there are cultural impacts. So all this needs to be brought together in one space, because it can't be talked about only as a science kind of a subject in that sense. Uh, uh, Yeah. Now you also have. I mean, there is no doubt about the fact that there is a sea level rise. You have there's a uh, in at a beach, people measure it from, if there was some well-known restaurant or bar at the on the on the beachfront, then they measure the sea level rise from, like, this farmer, tribal fisherman, who said now, that bar was at such a big walking distance from the shore. Now it is like bang near the shore. So that is their measure of the rise, of the erosion. And they say soon there will be no beach. And then the questions about tourism, but because tourism has been projected, it may not be the main money earner really for Goa, but it is still a significant earner, and it's being projected as it has been projected in the past, and it will continue for the image that it has, to be one of the places that people come to for tourism. Of course, this is besides the digital nomads who are also flocking to Goa to work from home. So then, if this is a kind of situation that we have, because a lot of people come for the beaches in Goa, along with the culture that is there. It's not also only beaches, because you have beaches all over India. So it's the beaches and the kind of culture and the syncretic culture that has existed. Now, if there are going to be no beaches, then who is going to come? So this is the question that the fisherman is asking. Uh, it's also the thing that the hotels are being constructed on sand dunes. This is what an activist who has been fighting a lot of litigation, along with others in before the National Green Tribunal, and then sometimes it goes to High Court because something is challenged, or so she this is what she's been saying. The hotel buildings are being constructed on sand dunes. As a result, the fish catch is declining. The waters are coming in. This poses danger to those who have houses on the coastline. The shacks would not have beach beds. Now they have beach beds that are being what she means is they are now you have beach beds. So now, as a result of all this, what this means is, first of all, coming back to the technocratic approach to to sand dunes. You see, so now with this kind of technocratic approach to sand dunes, what happens is they say, you know what, we have flattened the sand dune, but we have put a huge building in its place. So, you know, where's the question of, waters coming in? They just don't seem to understand that it's not, sand dune is not about some physical block that's there, just the physical block. It's also about its vegetation. It's also about its capacity. How does it retain water? How does it absorb the water? It's so much more than that in terms of the ecosystems that the kind of ecosystem that there is around a sand dune. And all they can think of is, oh, it's like, you know, sand dunes are like some high level things. So instead of a sand dune, you cut the sand dune and you put a hotel there, and the tourists will be able to jump from the hotel into the sea for swimming. So they don't have to walk to the beach. This is the kind of approach and attitude there is. So it's about changing our perceptions, our understandings of life and lifestyles that we need to address. Changing our perceptions means not just our perceptions as in the local people also, but it's about changing perceptions, I mean, in terms of lifestyles and everything the world over, and to understand that, you know, those kinds of lifestyles mean exploiting the environment, mean extorting from the environment, and therefore it is a problem for it can only aggravate climate change and can only make us all the more vulnerable to climate change. Now, on account of the what shall we say, the majoritarian systems that we have, this climate change thing means that our monuments get affected, but now because of the majoritarian approach, they don't care about the monuments which happen to belong to the minorities. So you have people saying, we have been requesting authorities for there's a Safa Masjid, which is a very it has to be seen to be understood. But you will find pictures on the net of the Safa Masjid. Now we have been, they say this, you know, we have been requesting authorities for a few years to build drainage systems to divert the increased flow towards the monument. And yet, so these are the voices that are being said, but hardly anyone is really paying due attention to them. Then it's the same with many other internationally known monuments. So you have architect Fernando Vallejo, who says a larger volume of water flow into the core area from slopes has been disastrous for the World Heritage Complex with a cluster of internationally known monuments. And this is referring to Old Goa, which has a lot of the old churches and various monuments, in fact, which are declared as world World Heritage Monuments. So therefore, as I said, it's a multiple set of factors that have to work, because if people want to, for example, in this case, if people want to teach another community a lesson, then they'll say, okay, we won't care for how your monuments are going to get affected. So we won't care if those particular areas are inundated, because we are not caring about that community. So you see, all these factors also come into play, which we cannot ignore. Now we also have a lot of there has been rapacious mining. It had come to a halt thanks to dedicated activists and litigation, which went up to the Supreme Court. But now it is commencing again, and they're auctioning it. And I don't know if it's worse because they're auctioning it to the highest bidder. So it would be, we had the local bigwigs, and now we may have global bigwigs who are more difficult to address, because they have very, very what shall we say, very, very, very deep, they will have tentacles which kind of plow deep, kind of. So this activist is saying our mining belt is located on the hills, as a result of which there is excavation of hills for mining. And so also the groundwater table gets affected due to high horsepower pumping of water. for the mines, that is. Also, there's a lot of loss of forest cover, tree cutting for mining. Mining, therefore, ends up being a significant contributor to global warming in Goa. Okay. Now, I would say that in this context, in all this thing, therefore, you have to look at local context. We cannot isolate our climate change solutions from local contexts. Sorry. And we therefore need to look. Now, for example, one of the, I think the earlier speaker spoke about invasive species. Now, there was this one invasive species that used to be used for fencing fields. But those fields are now not cultivated. So they used to use it for fencing the fields. But those fields now are not cultivated and maintained anymore. Why? Because it's not conducive to farming, to farm. So people are abandoning those farms. Now they had grown that, that invasive species, but they would maintain it, they would prune it, etc. When they were farming. But when they're not farming, it's just left there. So it has become so bad that it is a scenario in which it has changed its course. So excuse me for a minute. Hello. So in this context, here you have a situation where that bonki, which is a kind of an invasive species, it has obstructed the flow of the river, and the river has changed its course, and the river flows to what were once fields, and the area through which the river once flowed has become the field. But then that survey number, that area to which it goes, is not in the name of the person who is, declared a tenant or who's the owner of the property, because that was river. So they cannot cultivate there either, even though if it's river changed, okay, it's changed its course, let's cultivate there. They can't do that. And the forest department now, this is the other thing about, getting super literal about things. So now this is an invasive species, and this needed to be dealt with. But now in the name of, they will not bother that eco-sensitive zones are being, the whole idea of eco-sensitive zones is being violated with huge constructions. The state won't bother about that. But when it comes to this, they won't give permissions for, pruning it or doing something, or even leave alone, setting aside a budget for addressing this kind of invasive species that has attacked. So that's why I say that, if they say, okay, this needs to be, you cannot, eco-sensitive zone, so you cannot touch it. We cannot get so literal. We need to look at the context and how what is happening, how it fits within the overall ecosystem and the micro ecosystems that are thriving due to that were thriving because of the way the ecosystems, because of the way the environment was sustained, the fields were sustained, the agriculture was sustained. Now, as I said, because, we talked here about people abandoning the fields. Now, you cannot also, again, not address this issue. Why are people abandoning? Because farming was made unfeasible. People stopped farming and were forced to make ends meet. Now, in Goa's specific situation, because of Goa's specific location and history, Goans have the opportunity to obtain a Portuguese nationality and then get a Schengen passport, which in turn is a passport to a job. So people are opting for Portuguese nationality, but India is not ready to acknowledge, while Portugal is ready to acknowledge dual nationality. That means Goans opting for Portuguese passport and Portuguese nationality while retaining the Indian nationality, but India is not ready for it. And these people very much have their heart in Goa, but they're going there because economic circumstances require them. But they have the financial capacity to maintain these fields. But they're not allowed, because now they're OCIs, and they're not allowed to hold the agricultural land, because OCI holders cannot hold agricultural land. This means possibilities of inputting into agricultural land with their resources also comes to a halt. So, I mean, they're not seeing local political specific, history specific issues that are arising, and the solutions that we need to look for in that context. Now, on the other hand, you also have these parochial, see, yes, climate change is global. And yes, we need to look at specifics locally, but we need to, as we say, the local is global and the global is local. So we need to look at all that together. But you will have, for example, the governments of Goa and Karnataka seemingly colluding. I won't say they really. I don't think. I think most governments are on the same page in terms of how they can extort the most, the way they operate. But they are seemingly colluding over the diversion of the Mandovi River. Okay, now this river is primarily flowing through Goa, but a portion of it flows through Karnataka. Now, there's been this very jingoistic approach where it is seen that this river diversion, why should we give our river, let our waters be diverted so that, Karnataka people will get some water because of the diversion. But so, when you start talking in these jingoistic terms, the governments use this as election agenda, both in Goa and Karnataka, to say, look, we are going to take care that, those people in Goa are not going to get this. Or the Karnataka will, governments of Goa will say, we are going to make sure that the waters are not going to be diverted into Karnataka. But they're not looking at the whole thing, that what is the implications of diversion of the waters from upstream, or waters from so they're not really looking at these issues, because they're caught in this parochial tit for tat solutions, unnuanced solutions. So and then they always the front will be, oh, it's to help the poor farmers. For example, when it's being argued by government of Karnataka, it says it's to help the poor farmers. But there have been studies that have done earlier of work where they have diverted, and which shows that the water didn't go to the poor farmers, but it went through some corridor, industrial corridor. So the thing is that in the name of helping the poor farmers, or in the name of being sensitive to people's demands, these things are being foisted, which are destructive of the local ecosystems. And this is something that's why that we also need to be to address. Just now, the government of Karnataka has said, you don't allow the diversion, we will not allow permission for the Goa Tanmar transmission project. But we also don't want that Goa Tanmar transmission project, because it's which the government wants in the guise of making up for shortfall of electricity. But the impacts of that Tanmar project, or the implications of the Tanmar project, have been huge. I do not know if any of you would have seen during COVID, there were these photos of, huge logs of wood, taking advantage of the fact that people are not, moving out. And those are areas that, people would frequent as part of, forest areas. But not knowing, it's only when one villager heard a huge sound, like a thunderous sound, because there were huge trees being cut, one after another. There was this vivid image of these huge logs of wood. So we don't want an electricity transmission project like this. At least you should change the route then, if we have to have more electricity. So if the government of Karnataka is saying tit for tat, so we will not allow permission, so be it, we don't want it. So we have to find ways to articulate it outside their binaries. And that's also very important. And last, I will say, when we use these words, climate resilient infrastructure, etc., it might be useful to use them also in terms of the kind of climate resilient infrastructure, the traditional climate resilient infrastructure in forms of like the Kazan lens, or whatever infrastructure we've had, that we have always used. I'll stop here. Sorry for any questions.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive session, ma'am. It was good. I would invite Ms. Bhargavi Rao, the chair, for her comments.
Thank you, Shweta, and thank you, Dr. Albertina, for that brilliant presentation. You touched upon many aspects that we've been hearing over the last few weeks from a whole lot of other speakers. And thank you for bringing in that community perspective of what climate change means to them. I can completely relate with it because the minute you go into rural areas or even talk to many sections of local communities in an urban sector, climate change is a terminology that they really don't relate with. And thank you for highlighting that. And some of the things that kind of stayed with me, or like a major takeaway to many of our participants today, is also about the rice transplantation narrative that you shared. I think that is so true for a large part of the Deccan Plateau wherever rice is grown. Traditionally, communities have been having this practice of, they make it a very celebratory event. Local customs and traditions have got integrated into this whole rice transplantation, because in Karnataka, in many parts where I have seen, the day the seed is brought down from the attic from where it is stored, there is a little function. The day the nursery bed is sown, there is a little function. And when they take it out from the nursery bed and transplantation happens, that's again, a big event. But now with the erratic rainfall, it's the same story here, and I've heard similar stories from Gujarat as well. And you highlighted how real estate is taking over everywhere and there is no value for farm work, which is so true. Thanks for highlighting the caste discrimination, which is present everywhere, across sectors, across all levels. And you were talking about the indigenous climate infrastructure, which has gone for a toss, which is so true. That again, reminded me of many things that are happening in Karnataka as well. Something that I remembered was when you were talking about the Kazan ecosystem, is also the Neeruganti system that we had in Karnataka, where Neeruganti was the manager who managed the water flow from every tank. Every tank would have this manager, and he had this traditional knowledge of what can be grown based on the amount of water that is stored in that particular tank, based on the amount of rainfall the region has received. We threw away this knowledge, we threw away all the Neerugantis, and today lakes are under different system agencies, from the minor irrigation department to the local municipality to the development authorities, on and so forth. There's so much confusion of how lakes have to be managed, and it has been challenged in the High Court of Karnataka. Even after fantastic judgments have come, it is taking its own time for people to even understand those judgments and implement them, because there are so many line departments who are also in charge of these lakes and nobody knows what is happening. Whereas this traditional system of having the Kazan ecosystem or even the Neeruganti system would have been, in an autopilot mode, people would have taken care of it. And it's very unfortunate that, such systems are gone. And also you highlighted the challenges with the technocratic systems, and the solutions that are being introduced everywhere. And everywhere it is about, app-based solutions, where half the communities don't have access to smartphones. And thanks for highlighting where the RE is going. Renewable energy, yes, to solve one climate change problem, we are creating a whole lot of other climate change scenarios. Because like you said, you were talking about how, the sand dunes are kind of creating, are making people more vulnerable. Or no, you mentioned about how the fields have become unviable and mud is being added, and how that is causing clogging, and it is making people more vulnerable to climate change. I think similarly, similar mistakes are being created in the name of RE, because as RE is unfolding across the country, local drainage patterns are being destroyed, and a lot more people will be vulnerable. We're already seeing a whole lot of tanks that are flooding because, again, the rain patterns are changing everywhere. So thanks for highlighting that, and thank you for highlighting what Elsa Fernandez has said. That quote was very interesting, and I'm sure our participants will hold on to that. The treasure of synergies is something very important. And thanks again for all the cultural stories that you shared about the pharma, the theaters, which is all so interesting. And I'm sure there are such practices across the Indian subcontinent, and which are slowly just disappearing. And there is no documentation also of many of these things, which is very sad. Yeah, and you also highlighted the majoritarian systems of how the monuments of minorities are not being protected. This is another story that I have heard also from Kerala. And yes, mining is being opened up everywhere, despite all the big promises we have made in the context of climate change. And mining is threatening the water systems, the biodiversity, the local ecologically sensitive zones in many spaces. Thanks for highlighting the invasive species again, and how something that was judiciously planted to take care of the farming borders, how today it has become a big mess. And there again, thanks for highlighting that lack of coordination between the forest department, academia, and the traditional knowledge. So on one hand, while the forest department has the power and the law is on their side, it is very unfortunate that the traditional knowledge is not being accounted for, and it's being erased, and academia's inputs are not really taken. And this was very interesting about the Portuguese nationality and the challenges that the region is facing now. And the Tanmar project that you spoke about also reminded me of the Mekedatu project that is being proposed in Karnataka, between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, where each state is coming up with its jingoistic statements and threatening each other. If you do this, I will do that, and if you do that, I will do this. So we are caught in this, and you said it perfectly when you said that there is no coordination between local governments, local regional governments, regional national governments, and between international governments. Absolutely no coordination. Everybody seems to be working in silos, and everybody seems to be working with blindfolds on. And I think everywhere the challenge today is about having set up some kind of goals. Just like our 500 gigawatts of energy, we will shift to 50% renewable energy. Where did we get these numbers from? So similarly, every agency, every institution today has certain goals and targets. So there is zero coordination, which we have seen in many of the sectors here in Karnataka. It's also, and I'm sure it's the same in states across the country, where, to solve one climate change problem, we are creating a whole lot of others. And thanks for highlighting that as misplaced solutions. Soumya Dutta, one of the earlier speakers, also spoke about the misplaced solutions, and I think you reinforced with many examples, and thank you so much for that. I truly enjoyed, and I'm sure many things that we had learned over the last few weeks, our participants can connect with that, and those points were reinforced in today's presentation from you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Shweta, to take questions from the participants.
Yes, definitely. So now the floor is open for questions. Participants may unmute themselves or put your questions in the Q&A box.
Well, very informative paper, and we comprehended much, from Goa. And I think we should preserve the indigenous, mode of technology that has been practicing for, hundred of years, in our region, South Asian region. That should be indigenous, techniques should be preserved. And in another side, as there is ever growing influx of, tourism in South Asia, now eye is open. This paper has opened the eye. How, what, what kind of strategy we should launch, by the local government, by the regional government, federal government, or the state government, to cope with the, tourist flow and its impact on, climate change. Tourists, they are making, the distorting, the climate, as they are burning the firewood, all that. And there is the garbage everywhere. For example, in Nepal, in Mount Everest, and other in other peak, in northern Himalayas, and annually government launch the program to sweep the Himalaya. And it is going to impossible, to collect all the garbages, and how tourists are made aware, with the climate change. And I think there should be a kind of a law, that should be needed, in the place where the tourist, there is a huge tourist influx, Thank you very much.
I can just sort of make a quick comment there, that what we've sometimes done is, because you have tourists and tourists. You have some tourists who are just out to kind of consume as much as they can, but then you also have tourists who are very conscientious. And what we've tried to do is to
Exactly.
the tourism as a way to use the fact of that we are a tourist state, to be able to highlight these issues, when tourists come, or to present leaflets to various people. Groups have even presented leaflets to tourists about these
Sure.
issues, or highlighted them to tourists. So we've also used it in that fashion, like and I'm
Yes, yes.
taking from what you were saying, Dr. Bamadev, that maybe, like, for example, because there used to be a lot of child sexual abuse due to tourism, there was like a child-friendly code that the tourists, that the hotel together,
Sure.
where they could speak and exchange, have an where they would be, they would be alerted to this issue. So I was wondering if there can be something on those same lines, in terms of an, being eco-friendly. I'm talking both in terms of the industry as well as in terms of individual units. Yeah.
All right. Are there any more questions? Yes, Priyanka.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening. Ma'am, I wanted to firstly know that if you have noticed some of the good practices when it comes to communities being in harmony, not exactly harmony, but I think the authorities and the communities coming up with a better solution, or something that is currently being done in Goa that is uh, helping with the uh, challenges that you have mentioned in your presentation. And secondly, since you gave us a lot of local context and the issues currently concerning Goa, and like you said about these synergies between the academicians and the indigenous knowledge, and also about the climate resilient infrastructure that does not necessarily have to be the man-made one, and could also be focused on the natural climate resilient infrastructure. When it comes to these things, what comes to my mind is that a lot of the conversation has to occur between the communities that possess this knowledge and between the authorities that have the power to actually do something about it. When we talk in that context, and how does that conversation go? Like, what is the path to actually get this be and like on ground action to be taken in this regard? That is my question. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, so I would say that as far as okay, in terms of good practices, now there has been maybe so during COVID, a lot of people, because we are we have already become not insufficient when it comes to vegetables and things like that. Goa gets its vegetables from Belgaum. So, but during COVID, because of the thing of blocking of transport because of various issues. At some point, transport was not allowed from Belgaum to Goa, etc. So then we went without vegetables, etc. And people went back to their fields and began cultivating the fields, all over again. And also began to realize the joys of cultivating. It's hard work. I won't romanticize returning to the fields, but I think it also brings its own sense of fulfillment when you're working in the field. I'm also one of those. So I would say that. So the thing is that in some places, what some people did was, because the owners are abroad, I told you, we have a disproportionately high number of OCIs because of our historical issues. So what the people here, those who are here, either they also have gone abroad, but they've come back, they weren't enough, and they've come back. So what they did was they said, we'll cultivate your fields. And so they showed that it's difficult, but it's possible to at least cultivate the fields to sustain for subsistence level farming. Even if it's not a commercial thing, because anyway the fields are not big size. First of all, Goa is itself small, so we're not talking of huge acres of fields that each one has. So this is some initiative at that level. Now, if one is talking of with governance and mediating governance, then there have been some initiatives. For example, there was this whole turtle nesting exercise. So people raised their concerns about turtle nesting, but we realized the community there soon realized that this is not going to work with only us just raising our voices. And so what eventually happened is that, but of course it also depends on responsive bureaucrats. So what happened is that there was a reflection on this, and you have today those people are like kind of designated as volunteers and for or guards, or to kind of ensure that those spaces are considered sacred and protected. And that is also in a sense a tourist attraction, but we need to draw from examples of how turtle nesting has been done in other countries, how it's been protected and not also violated by tourism. So they have found ways to do it, and I think we are getting there on that count. So some exercises like these definitely are happening, but the problem, as I said, is that while you have like climate change is like one side subject, you see. So all these are marginal subjects. So like, you have gender, you have climate change, you have like this. So and then you have development, which is like the main thing. And that development is characterized by extortionist methods, etc. And methods by which you can get maximum profits with the lowest inputs, both at human level and at nature level. So all this requires a change in that whole outlook, which I think we cannot depart from. And for that, therefore, these eco clubs, etc., must not only be talking like, you have gender clubs now, you have eco clubs, whatever. They must not only be talking about nature like commodities. There you have these lovely birds, and there you have these lovely sceneries, you have this hills here, and that's not eco consciousness. We need to go beyond creating an awareness to creating a sensitization and consciousness. So I think these are all things that we need to do simultaneously, and they're very hard, seemingly boring work, but I think it pays.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Any further questions? I think we can wait for another minute before we wrap up. All right. So I don't think there are any further questions. So I would like to thank Dr. Albertina Almeida for ma'am, your insightful session on how climate change affects communities and the importance of collective action in addressing the challenges that we are facing today. Thank you very much. And we look forward to having you in other future events of IMPRI as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Ms. Bhargavi Rao for her closing remarks for the day.
Oh, thank you, Shweta. And I again thank both our speakers today because it really opened up recalling everything that we have learned over the last few weeks, everything that Dr. Rekha shared. And now the Goa presentation was like an eye-opener to many things that's happening in the name of climate change and the big gaps, particularly in the context of indigenous knowledge and practices, and how technocratic solutions are being brought in. Thanks for pinpointing many of these nuances that otherwise would have got missed. So I think with that there is again a lot of food for thought for the last week before we close the program next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. With your permission, we can go ahead with the vote of thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
So as we come to the end of the session of week 8 of understanding the nuances of climate change in the Indian subcontinent, cohort 2, a 2-month immersive online introductory certificate training course as part of our climate online international monsoon school program. I, Shweta, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our chair and the experts, Ms. Bhargavi Rao ji, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, and Professor Rekha Nianthi for taking out their valuable time and allowing us to learn from their expertise. We thank all of our participants for raising pertinent questions and actively participating in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you next week on September 28th for our week 9, and which is going to be the last week of this training course. The speakers for the next session are Dr. Bamadev Sikdelji and Ms. Bhargavi Rao. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to IMPRI, Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.